Imagine this. You are standing on the crest of a hill where the waves of the North Sea now lap gently below. Beneath your feet lies not just water, but the grave of an entire continent. 10,000 years ago, a fertile plain stretched out here, covered in forests, crisscrossed by rivers, and dotted with human settlements. Britain was not an island, but part of a vast peninsula joined to the European mainland. Indonesia, not a chain of islands, but a massive continent the size of Europe, where people hunted elephants and tigers. And the Persian Gulf, not a salty basin, but a blooming river valley, the cradle of ancient civilizations, where the Tigris and Euphrates flowed through what could truly be called the Gardens of Eden. Yet in just 5,000 years, the ocean swallowed it all. Slowly, relentlessly, meter by meter, the water devoured the land before the eyes of dozens of generations. This is not
fantasy. It is fact, confirmed by satellite data, underwater archaeology, and NOAA models. What if everything we believed about the stability of our planet is wrong? What if the ocean is not an eternal guardian, but a predator that has already redrawn the world map once and is ready to do it again? Today, we will embark on a journey through evidence that challenges everything you thought you knew about Earth. We'll dive into sunken worlds, watch glaciers melt, and understand why myths about lost continents are not fairy tales, but echoes of real catastrophes. Get ready. We're beginning. In 1997, British archaeologist Bryony Coles published a map that shocked the world. She had reconstructed Doggerland, a submerged land the size of Great Britain where life had thrived 10,000 years ago. But that was only the beginning. Modern NOAA models, built on satellite imagery and deep-sea probe data, show how sea level rose a staggering 120 meters after the last ice age. Why? Glaciers that once covered a third of the planet melted, releasing trillions of tons of water. Imagine this. Every year, the sea rose by centimeters, imperceptible in a single human lifetime. Yet, within the span of a grandfather and his grandson, entire villages vanished beneath the waves. This is not just geology, it is the drama of humanity. The people who lived on those continental shelves watched their world shrink. They migrated, fought for the remaining land, and created myths about lost paradises. Plato's Atlantis, quite possibly a memory of Doggerland. Lemuria, an echo of Sundaland in the Indian Ocean. Mu, the drowned portions of Asia. These stories are not fiction, they are the collective memory of a real apocalypse. But let's turn to the science. The last glacial maximum occurred 21,000 years ago, when sea level was 120 to 130 meters. Trace lower than today. According to NOAA data and studies from the University of Pennsylvania, the melting happened in dramatic pulses. One of the biggest, Meltwater Pulse 1A, around 14,500 years ago, saw sea level rise 20 meters in just 300 years. By 5,000 years ago, the process had largely stabilized. In Europe, this rise swallowed Doggerland. Archaeologists still pull harpoons and mammoth bones from the floor of the North Sea. In Asia, it submerged Sundaland, a vast platform that once connected Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. The size of India, it was home to some of the earliest Homo sapiens who had migrated out of Africa. What about trade routes? Imagine land bridges that allowed effortless exchange of obsidian and amber. When the water arrived, those routes became sea lanes, and the first true mariners were born. In the Persian Gulf, the flooded valley forced people inland into Mesopotamia, where the Sumerians emerged. Their own flood myth, Utnapishtim, is an unmistakable echo of that catastrophe. Scientists' reaction? Initial skepticism. In the 19th century, geologists like Lyell spoke of slow, gradual changes. But data from the 2020s, from NASA's GRACE satellites, confirms it was dramatic. In 2023, a paper in the journal Nature on migrations in Sundaland, based on DNA evidence, was published. But the accumulated data pushes us toward an uncomfortable thought. If this happened back then, why couldn't it happen now?
Sea level is rising at 4 millimeters per year, faster than during the Holocene. In 1985, two young geophysicists from Columbia University, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, were sitting at a lab table staring at strange data from Black Sea seismographs. They noticed something utterly impossible. Beneath a thick layer of modern sediments lay a sharp horizon, as if someone had sliced through.
The geological record with a knife. Above it, salty seawater. Below, freshwater shells, river deposits, and even remnants of land plants. It looked as if a vast freshwater lake had transformed into a salty sea in just a few years. Ryan and Pittman asked themselves a question that turned everything upside down. What if the Black Sea wasn't always part of the Mediterranean? What if, 7,500 years ago, there was a gigantic lake here, its level 150 meters below the global ocean? And what if, one day, the Bosporus, the narrow isthmus separating it from the Mediterranean, burst open and salt water surged in with the force of 1,000 Niagara Falls? Their hypothesis was simple, like a hammer blow. Around 5600 BCE, global warming had melted enough ice to raise Mediterranean sea levels, eventually breaching the natural dam. In a matter of months, perhaps even weeks, the Black Sea filled with salt water. The shore
retreated by hundreds of kilometers. Entire civilizations living along the edges of this massive freshwater lake were trapped. To grasp the scale, imagine filling a bathtub from the faucet. Now imagine replacing the faucet with Niagara Falls and the bathtub with a lake the size of half of Europe. According to Ryan and Pittman's calculations, about 50 cubic kilometers of water poured into the lake every day, 200 times more than Victoria Falls. The roar could be heard for dozens of kilometers. Waves as tall as 10-story buildings swept away everything in their path. But this was just the beginning. When Ryan and Pittman published their work in 1997, the scientific community exploded. Some shouted, "Brilliant, this explains the biblical flood." Others, "Complete nonsense, where's the proof?" Critics argued, "Too dramatic, too fast, too much like a myth." After all, classical geology taught that sea level changes were always slow, gradual, over thousands of years. But Ryan and Pittman didn't stop there. They collected cores, long tubes of sediment from the Black Sea floor, and in every core there was that same sharp horizon. Below, freshwater mollusks of the species Dreissena, which can't tolerate salt. Above, saltwater species. No transition, no thousands of years of gradual salinization, just a knife-edge tut. Then underwater archaeology stepped in. In the 2000s, Robert Ballard's expedition, the same man who found the Titanic, discovered wooden structures, pottery, and even worked stone tools at a depth of 100 meters underwater, right on the former shore of the ancient lake. Radiocarbon dating showed, around 5500 BCE, people lived here, and then they vanished abruptly. But the Black Sea is just one piece of the puzzle, because at the same time, the ocean was rising across the entire planet, and the scientists examined the data, the clearer it became. We weren't dealing with a local catastrophe, but a global redrawing of the world map. In Europe, Doggerland sank, a vast plain connecting Britain to the continent. In Asia, Sundaland disappeared, a continent the size of India and China combined. In the Persian Gulf, the cradle of agriculture went underwater. And everywhere, the same scenario. First slowly, centimeter by centimeter, then sudden leaps when glacial dams or natural barriers burst. By the 2010s, NASA's GRACE satellites had revealed exactly how the ice sheets were melting. NOAA models began drawing maps of sunken worlds with meter-level precision, and the picture became chillingly clear. Between 10,000 and 5,000 BCE, humanity endured a slow but relentless apocalypse. Not one big flood, but thousands of small ones. Not in a single day, but over the lifetimes of many generations. They watched the water take their fields. They saw the cemeteries of their ancestors disappear beneath the waves. They saw sacred hills turn into islands and then vanish completely. They retreated, migrated, fought, and they passed down stories. Stories of a world that had once been larger, of a land the ocean swallowed. Those stories became myths.
myths of a golden age, of a lost paradise, of a great flood sent by the gods. But the accumulated evidence forces us to an uncomfortable thought. What if this isn't the end of the story? What if we are simply the next generation standing on the shore, watching the water creep ever closer? If you want to know what happened next, how exactly the ocean redrew the world, and why it matters to every one of us right now, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because from here on out, it only gets bigger. Ready to dive into the evidence? In 2004, off the coast of the Netherlands in the North Sea, a trawler named Colinda snagged something unusual in its nets. When the fishermen hauled up their catch, among the cod and flounder lay mammoth bones, flint arrowheads, and fragments of human skulls. These weren't random finds. These were artifacts from Doggerland, the drowned continent beneath their feet. Scientists from the University of Birmingham, led by Vince Gaffney, took those samples and started digging deeper, literally. Using seismographs and sonar, they scanned the seabed at depths of 30 to 50 meters. What they saw was staggering. Beneath a layer of silt lay the clear outlines of rivers, lakes, hills, and even ancient settlements. One river, which they named the Scotland Rhine, stretched for hundreds of kilometers across what is now the seafloor. Gaffney's team used NOAA data, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to reconstruct the map. According to their model, published in 2012 in the journal Antiquity, Doggerland covered 23,000 square kilometers, larger than present-day Great Britain. 10,000 years ago, the climate here resembled modern Scandinavia: tundra in the north, forests in the south. Population: Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, numbering in the tens of thousands. They hunted deer, fished in rivers, gathered berries. Archaeological details: antler harpoons up to 30 centimeters long, flint tools with microliths smaller than 1 centimeter. Radiocarbon dating shows the last settlements vanished around 8,200 years ago. But why did it sink? The classic explanation is gradual glacier melt. After the last glacial maximum 21,000 years ago, when sea level was 120 meters lower, melting was supposedly slow, 1 or 2 centimeters per year on average. Yet the data reveals sudden jumps. For example, meltwater pulse 1b around 11,600 years ago. 15-meter rise in just 300 years. That's as if the entire Amazon basin emptied into the ocean at once. Why do the classic models fail? They ignore local effects, landslides, earthquakes, lake outbursts. In Doggerland's case, the Storegga tsunami 8,200 years ago, a gigantic underwater landslide off Norway, 3,000 cubic kilometers in volume, as if the whole island of Cuba slid into the sea. A 20-meter wave wiped out the remaining settlements. Now let's move to Asia. In 2018, an expedition from the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, working with NOAA, explored the Sunda Shelf, what used to be Sundaland. They used deep-sea drilling rigs to pull cores from 100 meters down. The findings? Layers of peat and wood dated to 9,000 years ago, remnants of tropical forests with trees up to 50 meters tall, just like modern Borneo. Sundaland's area, 1.8 million square kilometers, larger than India. This is where the first Homo sapiens out of Africa migrated around 60,000 years ago, walking across dry land bridges. Observations: underwater maps reveal ancient rivers, deltas, even volcanic craters now submerged. In 2021, a paper in Science on genetic traces showed that the DNA of modern Indonesians and Australian Aboriginal people reveals mixing of populations that were later separated by rising seas. Why do old theories collapse? They assumed the islands had been isolated since the Neolithic, but the evidence shows Sundaland remained a single continent until 6,000 years ago. A 120-meter rise represents energy equivalent to the detonation of millions of atomic bombs released from melting glaciers.
Scale. Imagine the entire expanse of Europe from Britain to the Urals vanishing beneath the waves. That is no hyperbole. Sundaland was just as enormous. Classic explanations focused on global warming, but ignored local
factors. Monsoon rains that intensified erosion, and earthquakes along the Sunda Arc that accelerated the flooding. Closer to the Middle East, the Persian Gulf. In 2015, researchers from King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia took samples from the Gulf floor. Depths 50 to 100 meters. Findings: layers of freshwater sediments, remains of palm trees, and river channels dated to 8,000 years ago. Area of the ground valley: 400,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of France. According to the hypothesis, this was Dilmun of the Sumerians, a paradise on Earth. Parameters: the cores show a sharp transition from river sediments to marine ones around 6,000 years ago. Temperatures during the melt period: global warming of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, exactly what is now forecast for the 21st century. Why do the old models fail? They treated the Gulf as an eternal sea, that Noah a reveal it was a dry valley where the Tigris and Euphrates merged into a single super river, 1,000 kilometers long. The flooding drove people into Mesopotamia, where the first true cities were born: Ur, Uruk, Lagash. In 2022, a mission using underwater robots discovered stone tools and hearths at a depth of 70 meters. Proof positive, people once lived where oil platforms now stand. But this is only a tiny fragment of a far stranger picture. Because when we connect the dots, from the North Sea to Indonesia to the Persian Gulf, we see not random events, but a single global process. The ocean did not simply rise, it reshaped continents, migrations, and entire cultures. And these observations lead us to consequences that go far beyond geology. And now comes the most shocking discovery of all. This slow flood did not merely change coastlines, it changed humanity itself. When we join all the dots, Doggerland, the Black Sea, the Persian Gulf, the picture becomes terrifyingly clear. In just 5,000 years, the ocean took from us roughly 30 million square kilometers of land. That is an area larger than the whole of Africa. 30 million square kilometers of fertile plains, forests, rivers, and lakes. Everything vanished beneath the waves. And on those lands lived people. Millions of people. Research over the last decade, especially since 2020, shows that the sea level rise triggered one of the largest mass migrations in human history. In 2021, a paper in Nature by an international team of geneticists led by S.K. Willerslev at the University of Copenhagen analyzed DNA from more than 1,000 ancient skeletons across Europe and Asia. The result? Between 8,000 and 6,000 years ago, there was a sudden spike of previously unknown genetic admixture in European and Near Eastern populations. Where did these groups
come from? From the drowned lands. Refugees from Doggerland mixed with continental peoples. Refugees from Sundaland mixed with the ancestors of Australian Aboriginal people and Polynesians. Refugees from the Persian Gulf mixed with the earliest Sumerians. And this was not just movement, it was a cultural explosion. It covered 6 square kilometers and had up to 80,000 inhabitants. Before the flood, small villages. After the flood, monumental architecture, writing, irrigation. Why? Because the refugees brought knowledge, technology, and desperation. They had to survive on shrinking land. They learned to dig canals to reclaim soil from marshes. They invented cuneiform to count harvests in people. The flood became the catalyst for civilization. The same pattern appears in India. The flooding of the western continental shelf, the legendary Kumari Kandam of the Tamils, pushed people into the Indus Valley. There, the Harappan civilization arose. Planned cities, sewer systems, trade networks. In 2023, Indian archaeologists discovered underwater structures off the coast of Gujarat, walls dated to 9,000 years ago, lying 40 meters beneath the surface. In Europe, Doggerland's inhabitants retreated north and south. In the north, they became ancestors of the Scandinavians. In the south, bearers of the Erteboila culture in Denmark.
Suddenly, new tools and burial practices appear. Genetics confirms it. Britain's Neolithic farmers carry an admixture from Doggerland hunters. And now comes the most paradoxical part. These proofs reach far beyond geology and lead us straight into mythology. Why do almost all peoples of the world have a myth about the Great Flood? More than 500 cultures, from the Sumerians to the Maya, from the Greeks to the Chinese, tell the same story. There was a golden age, then the gods grew angry, water covered the earth, and only one righteous man survived on an ark. Classical anthropology used to say, coincidence, archetype. But now we know it is not an archetype, it is memory. Sumerian Ziusudra, Akkadian Atrahasis, Biblical Noah, Greek Deucalion, Indian Manu, all of them appear in the period after 6000–4000 BCE. That is exactly when the last great land masses were disappearing beneath the waves. The people who lived through it passed the stories on to their children. The children passed them to their grandchildren. Over thousands of years, the stories grew layers of gods, morality, and arcs. But the core remained unchanged. We lost paradise. The water took it. In 2024, a paper was published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Linguists reconstructed Proto-Indo-European and found roots connected with water and the loss of land that do not exist in older layers, as if the language itself was born from the trauma. These consequences go far beyond the past, because today we are witnessing the very same thing, only in fast forward. Since 1900, sea level has risen 20–25 centimeters. The current rate is 4 to 5 millimeters per year, and it is accelerating. According to the IPCC 2023 report, by 2100 we will see an additional 0.6 to 1.1 meters. By 2150, possibly 2 to 3 meters. That means goodbye Bangladesh, goodbye Venice, goodbye Miami, Shanghai, Alexandria. Billions of people living on coastlines will become climate refugees. And the most terrifying part, we are repeating the path of the ancients. They watched the water take their fields, and they migrated. We watch the same thing, and we argue. But the data do not argue. We stand on the threshold of a new global paleogeography. Only now we are no longer helpless hunter-gatherers. We have science, satellites, NOAA models. We can predict, we can prepare. Or we can become a new myth for future generations. There once was a great civilization that knew everything, but did nothing, and the ocean took it. If this picture makes your chest feel cold, that's normal, because we are only now approaching the main theory that explains all of this, and it will make you look at our planet in a completely new way. Like, if you want to know how has stopped the next flood, subscribe if you're ready for the big picture. Ahead lies the theory that changes everything. We have seen the evidence, we have seen the consequences. Now it is time to put it all together and call things by their proper names. The main theory that explains this entire global remapping of the world is both simple, plain, and terrifying. The post-glacial sea level rise was not a uniform process, but a succession of slow phases and sudden catastrophic leaps that together created the modern paleogeography of Earth and became the primary driving force of early human history. This theory is called the Holocene multiple transgressions hypothesis, and it unites the work of thousands of scientists from different fields: geologists, archaeologists, geneticists, climatologists. Key names: Paul Hoffman from Harvard, Kurt Lambeck from the Australian National University, Glenn Milne from Ottawa, William Ryan and Walter Pittman from Columbia, Vince Gaffney from Bradford. Their models, published in Nature, Science, and quaternary science reviews over the past 20 years, draw on NOAA data, NASA and GRACE satellites, ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica, and a global network of underwater seismic profiles. The essence of the theory.
My theory rests on three main points. First, sea level rise after the last glacial maximum was non-linear. From 20,000 to 10,000 years ago, relatively slow melting. Then two powerful meltwater pulses,
1A, 14,500 years ago, plus 20 meters in 300 to 500 years, and 1B, 11,600 years ago, another 15 meters. After that came the slow phase, from 10,000 to 5,000 years ago, an average of 10 to 12 millimeters per year. Imperceptible in one lifetime, but in 3 generations, entire coastal plains disappeared. Second, the global rise was amplified by local catastrophes. Outbursts of glacial lakes, Agassiz, Missoula, submarine landslides, Storegga, breaches of natural dams, the Bosporus. These events added sudden jumps of 5 to 10 meters in individual regions within years or even months. Third, and most important, these changes were not just background, they became the main driver of cultural evolution. The loss of vast territories, it created pressure that led to the Neolithic Revolution. The shift to agriculture, the first cities, writing, complex societies. Without the flood, there would have been no Sumer, no Harappa, perhaps no classical Egypt at all. Alternative theories? There are 2 main ones. The first is classic uniformitarianism. Everything happens slowly and gradually, no sudden jumps. The problem? It contradicts the Black Sea cores, Doggerland sonar data, and genetic evidence of abrupt population admixtures. The second is the comet hypothesis, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. 12,800 years ago, a comet triggered abrupt cooling followed by rapid melting. The problem? It explains only one jump, meltwater pulse 1b, but not the entire Holocene picture. The multiple transgressions hypothesis wins because it explains everything: the slow phases, the catastrophes, the cultural explosions, and the myths. But here is what it forces us to rethink the very foundations. We are used to thinking of Earth as a stable cradle of civilization, oceans eternal, continents immovable. In reality, the last 10,000 years are the exception, an extraordinarily stable period in the planet's history. Before that, millions of years of sea level swings of hundreds of meters. After us, if we do nothing, a return to the norm. The melting of Greenland and Antarctica could add another 70 meters. This is not just science. This is an existential challenge. We are the first generation that knows exactly what the world looked like before the flood, and the first generation that can stop the next one. Because modern models show if we exceed 2 degrees Celsius of warming, the West Antarctic ice sheet will enter irreversible collapse. That's plus 5 meters of sea level, in centuries, not millennia. We are not the helpless inhabitants of Doggerland watching the water rise. Ache their world. We have tools, we have knowledge. The only question is whether we will use them. If you feel your perception of the planet shifting, that's right, because next we will talk about the future, about missions that are right now collecting data that can give us the final answer, and about what we can still do while there is time. Recent breakthroughs give us reason to expect answers in the coming years, and they could change everything. Right now, in December 2025, satellites are orbiting Earth that can see glacier melt to the centimeter. The GRACE-FO mission, successor to GRACE, has been measuring the planet's gravitational field since 2018, showing exactly where ice is being lost. In 2024, GRACE-FO data confirmed Greenland is losing 280 billion tons of ice per year. Antarctica, 150 billion. These are not abstract numbers. This is water that is already in the ocean, or will be soon. Even more precise data come from NASA's NISAR mission, an Indian-American radar satellite launched in 2024. NISAR scans every piece of land and ice every 12 days at 10-meter resolution. In 2025, the first full maps already show the West Antarctic ice sheet has passed the point of no return. Thwaites Glacier, the Doomsday Glacier, the size of Florida, is melting from below by warm water. If it collapses completely, that's plus 3.3 meters of global sea level. Not over millennia, over centuries. And in the oceans, underwater robots are at work. The Argo program, 4,000 autonomous buoys, measures temperature and salinity down to 2,000 meters. In 2025, Argo began recording anomalous warming beneath Antarctica's ice shelves. This is accelerating melt 2 to 3 times faster than models predicted a decade ago. But the most exciting part is the upcoming missions. In 2026-2027, Europe plans to launch the Crystal mission, a satellite with an altimeter that will measure glacier height and sea level to the millimeter. In 2028, the American SWOT mission will continue mapping ocean currents, showing exactly how warm water is undermining the ice. And underwater? In 2025, the International Seabed 2030 program was launched. Its goal? Map the entire ocean floor by 2030. Already, new sonars are finding submerged landscapes in detail that Gaffney and Ballard could only dream of. In 2024, off the coast of Indonesia, they discovered an underwater river, a former Sundaland river, 500 kilometers long, still flowing beneath the sea. These technologies don't just give us data, they give us forecasts. According to the most conservative NOAA and IPCC 2023 models, by 2100, plus 0.6 to 1.1 meters. By 2050, up to 2 meters. By 2300, 3 to 5 meters, even with drastic emissions cuts. Under a business-as-usual scenario, up to 10 meters by 2300 and 20 to 30 meters by 3000.
What does that mean? Imagine London without the Thames Barrier, its center permanently flooded. New York with a subway filled with water forever. Shanghai, Dhaka, Cairo, tens of millions of climate refugees. The Netherlands, Bangladesh, Vietnam, countries that simply disappear from the map. But there is another path. Technologies that can deliver a breakthrough. Large-scale carbon removal from the atmosphere. Projects like Climeworks are already capturing thousands of tons of CO2. By 2050, billions of tons are possible. Geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol injection, spraying particles to reflect sunlight. Risky, but models show it could buy us decades. Coastal protection. The Netherlands is already building floating cities. Singapore is raising land. The Maldives are planning artificial islands. We stand at a crossroads the ancients never had. They could only flee. We can fight. And most importantly, the timescale is no longer geological. It is human. If we reach net zero emissions by 2050, sea level rise stops at 1 to 2 meters. Billions saved. If not, we will create a new slow flood, only 1,000 times faster. We are the generation that knows the story of Doggerland, Sundaland, the Persian Gulf. We see their maps in 3D. We read the DNA of their refugees. The question for humanity: will we become the new myth of a lost golden age, or the first generation that stopped the ocean? We have reached the very edge. What comes next are the deepest questions, the most profound conclusions, and the ideas that will make you rethink reality itself. If your heart is beating faster right now, that's exactly right. Because we are no longer talking about the past, we are talking about your future, about the future of your children. We have reached the very edge. The questions that keep you up at night?
Conclusions that change not only our understanding of the past, but reality itself. The deepest insights emerge when we consider how this slow flood shaped not just maps, but our very identity as a species. First big question: would human civilization have been possible without this flood? At first glance, yes. But the data say the opposite. Without the loss of vast coastal territories, there would have been no pressure to drive innovation. In Doggerland and Sundaland, people lived as hunter-gatherers, abundantly, with no need for complex structures. When the water came, resources shrank. They had to invent agriculture to feed more people on less land, irrigation to fight soil salinization, cities to coordinate migrations and defense, writing to record knowledge about the lost lands. In 2023, Oxford anthropologists published an analysis in the Journal of Archaeological Science. 80 Neolithic settlements in Eurasia are located in the very zones where sea level refugees migrated. This is no coincidence. The flood is the mother of civilization. But here is the paradox. If the flood created us, Why do we forget it? Why are flood myths always divine punishment and never melting ice? Because people did not see the global picture. They saw only local catastrophes, the Bosporus breach, the Storega tsunami. To them, it was wrath from above. Now we know the science, yet we still ignore it. Second question, how is this connected to other global phenomena? The flood was not isolated. It is part of the Milankovitch cycles, Earth's orbital variations that trigger ice ages every 100,000 years. The last maximum was 21,000 years ago. The next minimum is 50,000 years away. But the human factor is accelerating everything. Our CO2 emissions, 420 ppm in 2025, higher than at any time in the last
0 years are injecting chaos into the system. Connections to other phenomena. Volcanism. In Indonesia, Sundaland's flooding coincided with eruptions. Water intensified erosion, triggering earthquakes. Biodiversity. Submerged shelves became new ecosystems, but land loss accelerated megafauna extinction. Genetics. Migrations created modern populations. Europeans with Doggerland admixture, Asians with Sundaland genes. Third paradox. Why are we repeating the mistakes of the ancients? The ancients saw the rise and adapted, turning their experience into warning myths. We see the rise, measure it with satellites, and still build on the coastlines. 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of the sea. By 2050, 1 billion people will be at risk. Unresolved paradox. Will technology save us or hasten collapse? Geoengineering could cool the planet, but trigger unforeseen side effects, like new floods from arid precipitation. Fourth question. What if flooding is the norm of the universe? Earth is not unique. Mars shows traces of ancient oceans that drowned continents. Venus has volcanic plains, possibly from runaway global warming. Even on exoplanets, in 2025, the JWST discovered atmospheres rich in water vapor. If life is adaptation to change, then our flood is a lesson for the entire galaxy. Now, future scenarios. Scenario 1. Optimistic. We reach net zero emissions by 2040. Remove CO2. Rise stops at 1 meter. Cities adapt. Amsterdam 2.0. Floating districts. Controlled migrations. Flood myths become school lessons. Scenario 2. Realistic. The Paris Agreement is partially honored. Rise of 2 to 3 meters by 2200. Massive migrations. 200 to 500 million refugees. Resource conflicts. New civilizations emerge in continental interiors. Scenario 3. Pessimistic. Business as usual. Rise of 5+ meters. Collapse of coastal megacities. Economic chaos. 10% of global GDP lost. New myths about the Great Flood of the 21st century. Scenario 4. Extreme. Full ice sheet collapse. Plus 60 meters. Earth returns to its state 3 million years ago. No Florida, no Netherlands, no Bangladesh. Humanity reduced to island cultures, like a new Sundaland. These scenarios are not fantasy. They come from CMIP6 models, the global climate modeling effort involving hundreds of universities. We are at the point where a choice still exists, but the window is closing. This is the culmination. The ocean that swallowed the ancient world now stands at our doorstep, and we decide whether to become the victim or the hero. Let's sum up our journey. We began with a map of a world where the ocean swallowed entire continents before the eyes of generations. We dove into the discoveries of Ryan and Pittman, saw the strange data from the Black Sea, and realized that the flood is not a myth, it is reality. Then we gathered the evidence, from mammoth bones in the North Sea to the drowned rivers of Sundaland and the cradle of civilization in the Persian Gulf. We saw the consequences, mass migrations, the birth of cities, echoes in myths of lost paradises. The big picture emerged through the theory of multiple transgressions, non-linear rise, local catastrophes, cultural explosion. And the future? It is in our hands. GRACE satellites, NISAR missions, technologies that can stop the next flood.
We have learned that Earth is not static. It breathes, it changes, and we are part of that breath. We have learned that myths are encrypted history, and science is the key to them. Yet much remains a mystery: the exact timing of future jumps, the role of volcanoes in amplification, how to adapt billions of people. The current scientific consensus, according to NOAA and IPCC,
reports 2023-2025, sea level rise is inevitable, but controllable. If we act now, we save the coasts. If not, we become the new Doggerland. Thus, according to NOAA and NASA reports, from 1993 to 2024, sea level rose more than 10 centimeters, on average 3.7 millimeters per year. But in recent decades, the rate has doubled. From 2014 to 2024, the rise was 4.5 centimeters, i.e. about 4.5 millimeters per year, more than twice the long-term average. This comes from the Climate Change Tracker report. If the trajectory continues, as NASA's PODAC, Physical Oceanography Distributed Active Archive Center, forecast in February 2025, the next 3 decades will bring more than 16.9 centimeters of rise. Imagine, it's as if the entire ocean gained an extra layer of water the thickness of your palm, and that's only the beginning. Why the acceleration? The main culprit is glacier melt. In December 2025, CNN reported on underwater storms off Antarctica
that are eroding Thwaites Glacier and neighboring Pine Island Glacier. Thwaites alone holds enough ice to raise sea level by more than 60 centimeters, 2 feet, but it acts as a cork for the entire West Antarctic ice sheet. If it goes, that adds 3 to 4 meters globally. New data show warm water penetrating beneath the ice, creating turbulent flows that accelerate melting 2 to 3 times faster. This is a local catastrophe reminiscent of the ancient Bosporus breach, but on a global scale. Another report from the Environmental Law Institute in June 2025 states, last year, 2024, sea level rose 0.16 centimeters more than expected. Seems trivial? It's a signal. The models are underestimating the speed. The Vibrant Environment blog emphasizes that courts and policymakers are not keeping up with science. Cities like Miami and New Orleans are already spending billions on dikes, but if the rate doubles again, it will
be useless. Now let's look at regional data. NOAA's Sea Level Rise Viewer, an interactive tool updated in 2025, allows modeling of rise up to 3 meters, 10 feet. For Europe, this threatens the Netherlands and Britain. Remember Doggerland, it could return in reverse. In Asia, Bangladesh and Vietnam will lose millions of hectares. In the United States, Florida and Louisiana will suffer. Projections show that by 2050, 13 million Americans will become climate refugees. In Hawaii, according to a report in November 2025, the updated Sea Level Rise Viewer includes new scenarios integrating state-level data. They account not only for rise, but also erosion, storms, and soil salinization. The link to antiquity? In our story, we spoke of migrations from Sundaland and Doggerland. Today, it's analogous. In March 2025, the World Economic Forum published the report Sea Level Rise, Everything You Need to Know. They say that the rise threatens the global economy with $5 trillion in losses, from ports to agriculture. This is an echo of ancient consequences. Loss of land leads to migrations, conflicts, innovation. But now the scale is cosmic. If Antarctica melts completely, plus 58 meters, Earth returns to its Eocene state 50 million years ago. What about Arctic ice? The National Snow and Ice Data Center, NSIDC, updates data daily. In December 2025, Arctic sea ice is at a record low, with just 1 day lag in reporting. Antarctica, the underwater storms are new expedition data showing how ocean currents are accelerating the process. The IPCC's old AR1 report, 1990, predicted rise, but reality is outpacing it. Philosophical implications. In 2025, we see the flood shaping politics. COP30, if it happens, is discussing compensation for island states. The Maldives, Kiribati, modern Sundalands. We are repeating ancient trauma.
but with tools, satellites, AI models, green technologies. The 2025 data confirm our theory. The rise is accelerating, and without action, we will witness a new, slow flood. But we still have a chance. Follow updates from NOAA and Copernicus. They can save the world if we listen. Thank you for staying with us. If this video has opened your eyes to the hidden world beneath the waves, give it a like, share, and subscribe. In the next videos, we'll dive even deeper into the secrets of sunken cities, the myths of Atlantis, and how to save our planet today. See you in the ocean of knowledge.